Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me on today's episode of the Trafficking Free America podcast. In our episode today, we talk about John School. Have you ever heard of it? In a nutshell, it's an educational course someone has to take after being caught purchasing commercial sex. We're going to give you the full introduction to it, but what we address in this podcast is the desire for a better way to address sex buying within our judicial system. Because the truth is that John School doesn't really work. It's a lame slap on the wrist system. Knowing how our system works will truly help us, as a society, work to prevent abuse, trafficking, trauma, and sexual addiction in this country, which is what this podcast is all about. All right, guys. Well, welcome back to our podcast today. We are going to be discussing John Schools, what they are, what really goes on, and really the question is, are they helping with the problem of demand? As we, I like to always reiterate when I say demand, the demand for commercial sex, which obviously it fuels the human trafficking industry, the sex trafficking industry. The demand is simply like, oh, there's people to buy, and so if you have buyers, you have a market. Yeah. If we don't have buyers, there is no market, and trafficking goes away, theoretically, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, if we can stop the buying from happening, that's going to be a major impact. The only way to stop the demand is to address sexual addiction, sexual dependency. Ultimately, when I say dependency, not the wanting of it, but rather the I feel like I need it, and start driving compulsions toward pornography, toward ill actions, and understanding that these are ill actions and how the church can get involved in helping out with this. So this is everything that we're tackling. And part of that is to understand how things are seemingly being tackled right now to help with demand and how they're not. So first, let me just go and open the floor to say, what do you believe? I'll ask you first, Christy, because I know that Alan's more the expert in this. What do you believe John School is?
My understanding is that John School is a program for men who have been caught purchasing women on the street, and they've been arrested and convicted, and it plays into their rehabilitation. That's my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is basically the same thing as almost like traffic school.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah, so, So, Alan, are we right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great synopsis of what John School is. And, unfortunately, it does function like driver's school in the sense that, and I'm sure nobody in this room has ever gotten a ticket, but if you had, you'll get offers in the mail to go to John School, and maybe half a dozen or a dozen different driving schools, and obviously people are going to take the path of least resistance. They're going to pick the cheapest one, the one that's the fewest number of hours to satisfy this requirement, and maybe online versus in person for convenience, right? Well, John School functions sort of the same way. And there may be only a few offerings in one particular community, but, the person who's facing the need to go to one is going to pick the ones that's cheapest and easiest and shortest and online if he can do that. Now, this wouldn't ordinarily be a problem, except for the fact that, and this is the real issue with John Schools, they tend to take an education approach to what we now know and understand to be a addiction and trauma-related problem. So that just doesn't line up well. And because it is an addiction and trauma problem, we need a lot more depth and scope and time and work to start the process of educating and inspiring these guys to take on a real healing journey to overcome their problem. And John School is uniquely positioned to help us do that, which is why we developed the first trauma-informed, addiction-centered John School. It just is approved only in the 13th Circuit here in Florida, which is Hillsborough County, where Tampa is. But it's the largest and most robust and in-depth in the world, as far as we know. It's 24 hours, 12 2-hour meetings over 3 months.
That's what John School is?
No, I call it John University. John School is typically 4 to 6 hours for around $300 or $400, and they go in person like an hour a week for 6 weeks or for 4 weeks.
So, what is the difference between John School and John University?
Well, John University is my term for this trauma-informed approach that goes a lot deeper and focuses on addiction and addiction recovery. That is not your typical John School. It's a new invention of the Sexual Integrity Project, because we really feel that's what's needed. What we have now in your typical John School is a curricula, that focuses on what it's like to be a trafficked person. They want to explain to these guys the impact that their actions are having on other human beings, which is good. That's not a bad thing. It's good for them to understand that. It will run through the sanctions that exist for sex buying, especially if you get caught a second or a third time. It will talk about other consequences like STDs. And they usually have a survivor come out. And at the John School I attended, which was up in Minnesota, that was not a pleasant experience, because she flat out told the men in that room that they needed to stop, and this was her word, raping the women. I can't speak for the other men, but, that kind of hurt me. It hurt my feelings at the time, because I was just trying to step into my own recovery. And in my experience, the women that I had been with had presented themselves as consenting adults. And I never would have thought of my actions as rape. Now, that survivor, she might be right. But if you understand how addiction works, if you're going to shame somebody and just try to hurt them, where do you think they go to self-medicate that pain you just visited on them? So it's like throwing gasoline on the fire, and it was making, I think, the problem worse for her audience than solving it. But I certainly understand where she was coming from. So you get a survivor's perspective in a good John School. But
did you understand it during John School?
Not to the level that I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
I was very compromised at that time, intellectually, because I had been acting out for years with pornography, and then later with other people. These are scans of a healthy brain on the left, a heroin addict's brain in the middle, and a porn addict's brain on the right. It's the most atrophied of the three brains. And
well, what are we looking at here? And for any of our audience,
so this is a top-down view, and so you're looking from the top of the head down. That's the vantage point for the brain scan. What we're looking at the top of the image is what's the front of the brain. So that's the frontal cortex, and most importantly, the prefrontal cortex. That's where all of our executive functioning is, our capacity for judgment is in that section. And as you can see, it's highly scalloped and atrophied, and there's actual holes where we're supposed to be exercising judgment. So a man who's deep in sex addiction, he's not capable of making good decisions. Physiologically, not capable.
Yeah, so help any... First of all, I still am kind of confused what I'm looking at. Are you? But what is the scientific thing? Because what you have written here is what starts as a moral problem very quickly becomes a medical problem.
Yeah.
What is the medical problem?
So the medical problem is neuroplasticity. You start viewing pornography or having sex with multiple partners, and your brain changes to accommodate that new behavior. So you can't see it in this scan, but the eyes, which are at the top but below where we're looking, the visual cortex, which is at the back, the vision centers, and all of the material in between gets very robust, and you become like a pornography-consuming machine. And that comes at the expense of these other areas where we see gaps and holes missing. Your brain just kind of morphs to help you watch more porn. So, things like having empathy for another human being, being able to put yourself in someone else's situation, being even able to do something as simple as project the impact of your actions and their consequences, just become increasingly more difficult the deeper into this you go.
So the deal is that John's school seems to be approaching someone who they feel should feel empathy, they feel should feel these things, but the reality is they're talking to someone who's sick who can't.
Right. There's someone who's sick who can't, and they think if they just educate them that their behavior will change. And I'm sure that it does for some whose behavior wasn't motivated by addiction. But we know that the majority, it is motivated by addiction. World Without Exploitation came out with a report in 2022 where they estimated that 70 to 75% of sex buyers are sex addicts. There's another study by demandabolition.org where they studied the data of sex buyers and found it to be very bimodal. So 25% of the men were buying what they called high frequency, which is once a month or more often than that. The remaining 75% low frequency, and they went on to suggest that these high frequency buyers are motivated by addiction. I actually think that some of the 75% are motivated by addiction. When I look at that, you talk about when crime analytics means motive and opportunity, right? So these 75% may not have the means or the opportunity every time they want to buy sex. But I still believe a good portion of them, it's motivated by addiction. We have data at the Sexual Integrity Project from 13 recovered sex buyers. And when you study that data, it pretty much shows that well over 90% of the sex purchases we've displaced by helping those 13 men come to a place of healing were previously motivated by addiction. Yet the John School curricula take this education approach. So I just really think that misses the mark, because the sad truth is what happens after you educate that addicted John is you've just increased his shame, because he can't stop his behavior. He just feels worse about it than he did before.
So let me ask this question: let's back up a little bit. What is the sexual the John School curriculum?
Well, it was like what I was walking through before. They'll have some statistics and information about what it's like for these victims that he's hiring. That she has a pimp, that guy's not nice, withholds all kinds of necessities from her, keeps her money. So even though she's working very hard and getting traumatized in the process, she doesn't even get to keep the fruits of her labor. It's absconded with by others. They teach you all of that. They teach you about the sanctions that are in place in your state, what your consequences are for getting caught, and what they would be, and how they would increase if you get caught again for a second and third time. They obviously escalate. They talk about STDs and unwanted pregnancies and everything that can come from, the illicit sex market, and they're just trying to educate. So that works on a guy who's not motivated by addiction and who doesn't have an addiction or a dependency type problem with sex. If he's got a good moral compass, if you allow it that somebody with a reasonably good moral compass would ever do this, and you educate him, then he can come and fall back into line. But that's not the majority of the activity. So I really think there's a need for a trauma-informed addiction recovery approach to these men when they get caught. And my hope would be if we could receive a flow of men from the legal system here in Tampa, Florida, Florida's 13th district, we could make an impact, because I think in those 12 2-hour weekly sessions, we could get through to a guy enough that if he really has a desire to overcome the problem and just didn't know how, he would know how, and he could extrajudiciously step into one of our recovery groups or therapy groups and spend the time necessary to reach lifelong healing, which in the previous episode we mentioned that's a 2 to 5 year process. And the court's not going to sentence anybody to a John school that long. What you're really talking about is using our system as outpatient long-term rehab, which we're happy to do. We do that with diversion programs through the Department of Corrections. But I would really like to see a flow of men into our John School, John University program in the future, because I think we could really do a lot to turn the tide of this issue here locally in our community.
If you have anything, feel free to jump in.
No, I just think it's wonderful. I agree with Alan. The important part is the trauma informed. It's asking the men, how did you get here? There's a whole story in your background on how you ended up here, and once you relieve that, settle that, heal that, then all of this will go away. So I'm in complete agreement. The trauma-informed piece is the crucial piece. Otherwise, we're just looking at bad men saying, you're a bad man, you're doing bad things, stop doing bad things.
I agree. I don't think education makes someone stop doing something. I think education possibly keeps them from doing something.
Right. And just so I can make it clear, the curriculum we have at John University does not really take away anything they were doing at John's school. We still educate them about all those things. We still want to bring in a survivor to tell her story and try to engender the beginning seeds of some empathy with these men. We just simply adding the trauma-informed piece, running them through a good introductory program like Sexual Integrity 101 from Pure Desire Ministries. Another good one is Conqueror series from Kingdom Work Studios. Those are about 10 lessons, and they come with workbooks, and we do the recovery group model right there in the John University, try to get the guys to open up and start sharing, and that's the model. And it's unfortunate we only get 12 meetings because we know they need more, but that's the most that the court system would approve.
Well, where is a John University occurring versus a John school right now?
It's not.
So sorry, so maybe I misunderstood.
No, it's approved.
We only receive.
When I said
so it's approved.
It's approved.
Okay.
And we don't have the budget to rent or buy a suitable place to hold it. The other problem we have is that the court is not recognizing the difference between our program and the others. Mm-hmm. So they're classifying it as a John school, even though it's a whole lot more than that. And then the judges run into the problem that they're not allowed to order a specific John school. They just have to order the umbrella John school. And then we're left, it's up to the perpetrator to pick their John school, and they don't pick ours because it's the hardest and the most expensive and the longest. They pick one of the ones that isn't very effective.
Naturally,
so we're kind of stuck in the mud.
Traffic school.
Yeah. So
4 hours, 2 hours,
yeah.
half an hour?
One of the things I pray for is a way out of this quagmire. But if we could get the court system to recognize the difference, one way to do that is by becoming accredited as outpatient rehab. But it would take a lot of money to do that. My understanding is you have to have a physician on staff to even be considered, and we can't afford that yet. But that is one way, and then they could just order rehab. And those guys could go to one of the places like Dave talked about that's inpatient, 30-day, 45-day intensive. Most of those are out of state and very expensive, so this in-town outpatient rehab that will allow a guy to keep his job and his family and his finances intact, it would become very attractive. But like I said, we don't have accreditation for that yet. So I'm just hoping we can find a way to get the court system to recognize the difference. Some of them have. It's been ordered for one individual who lives in the Mount Dora area of Central Florida but got caught attempting to buy sex and a sting here in Hillsborough County. So we have one guy that needs to complete by October, and so we're working with him. And then we have another man that was just ordered into recovery in our recovery group process for 2 years of rehab as part of his prison sentence. So that's the beginning of something that could be big. He was facing 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation, and then a lifetime as a sex offender on the official registry for sex offenders. And in the end, the judge ordered 2.5 years of incarceration, dismissed all of the probation, dismissed all of the sex offender registry, and ordered 2 years of recovery in our program after the incarceration was satisfied. So that saves the state a ton of money. In this man's case, it made a lot more sense for him to get some rehabilitation instead of a lot of incarceration. And, the program's just not that well known yet, but as it becomes more commonplace and more judges learn about it, this could be an avenue to bring rehabilitation to these men.
Would you say that, I know that you're in the beginning of this and you're trying to start it, and which we greatly encourage, thinking about John's school, and it's funny, I just did a quick Google search.
Yeah. What did it come up with?
Success of John's school. They all seem to say the same thing, which is there's no sound evidence of it being successful.
Not yet.
Wow.
Of John? No, this is of John's school.
I know, not yet.
Yeah.
But I think if we can put in John University,
well, I mean,
and get some data around
John
the recovery.
It's not John's school.
No, it's
I guess
not.
my
It's
point
a
is
separate
that
thing.
if,
But
we know something's not successful.
right.
Right.
So why are we still banging our
But
heads
we're still
against the
doing
wall?
We've been
Same
doing this
thing.
for years.
Yeah, it doesn't
It's
work.
not.
Okay.
This is not new.
Yeah, it's I'm not saying it's bad, but
Sure.
it's not effective. So
Sure.
I think if we paired John University, if we got it started, and follow these men in a longitudinal study, I've got a couple of people at USF Trafficking in Persons Laboratory and the UCF Anti-Trafficking Department, who are just bona fide scientists that would love to follow these people with real data and write peer-reviewed papers on it. I think down the road, we could prove the effectiveness. I know it's effective. I just need to show everybody.
So, I mean, what I would say as how we take action steps with something like this is we need to advocate that we no longer just only require John's school. It's silly. It's not successful. It's a good start. Great start. John University may not be successful, but it's the next step in trying something. I mean, I think one of the things that aggravate me, and every time I go deeper into what is causing human trafficking, what's causing this is this. Okay, I dive deeper into that, and I discover some things. Isn't it annoying how often we're seeing like someone say like, all right, so I started this thing, I've washed my hands of it, I'm done. I just imagine, fine, crucify Christ, I wash my hands of it. It's just like, what are we doing? We can, if we know we can do better, why are we being so lazy about it? So when I think about the state's approach, the country's approach to this, we can do so much better.
Yeah, I don't know if that statement's correct, though, that we know we can do better. Certainly there are new thought leaders who know that we can do better, and there's people like Christy and me and Dave who know that we can do better. But if we want to make a blanket statement across the whole nation, just your average Joe on the street, I don't think we know that we can do better. I think a lot of people accept the status quo because they don't know that there is better out there. And so part of raising awareness is to sound the trumpets about this, that we have a better solution and we need to, all get in line and try this new idea.
Or I agree with you. But in the very least, if you see that if you've done something for years and the data doesn't show anything, it's time to shift. I don't care who you are or where your moral compass is. That's just that you're being lazy and you're ignoring it. So you're right. Maybe you know what? Let's just use that argument for a second. Maybe we can't do better. Does that mean we shouldn't try?
Yeah, even if you can't do better, you should still try something different
Yeah.
to see if you can learn if there's a better way.
Now, why do you believe that something like John University will work so well? I know you've kind of touched on it, but
yeah, well, I think I got over my skis a little bit there because I said it would work well, and the truth is, I don't think that it will work well by itself.
Okay.
You can't fix this problem in 24 hours.
Sure.
You can't. But what you can do in 24 hours is you can inspire somebody to step into a recovery group and take on their own healing journey. They can come into our system of recovery groups, find one that's convenient to them in terms of where it is, the day of the week, and that is what works. Spending those 2 to 5 years being accountable to other men, going through the workbooks, going to one-on-one therapy to resolve the deep traumas that have been driving the behavior. That's what works. And I cannot give that in a John School or a John University. But I think if I touch on it in John University and bring in testimonials, not just from survivors, but from men who have overcome sex addiction, recovered sex buyers, and it's my plan that they will teach the class and we'll also have others come in and, give a talk about what life was like for them when they were in the life and broken and addicted, and what it's like for them today after going through the process. Man, I think we could really inspire at least a good portion of the men that get ordered to John University to step into the real work and turn their life around.
So what's an action step we should take to make our voices known? Hey, John School's not working. Let's try to do something better. Let's try to do you caught them. The only reason why they're going to John School is because you caught them buying sex. How can we start advocating a better approach for this?
How do you get better traction through the judicial system?
Yeah,
Local, state,
that's
federal.
That's what I need to do. And it's tough. If talking to a church about putting in a group is tough, talking to
a judge.
Judges about ordering John University, that's going to be tough too. Some of the folks that have brought this to the forefront and said, hey, this particular defendant really could benefit from this program, have been the probation officers at Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. They're the ones that have inserted themselves into this whole process. The judge that presented our program, the lawyer, the defense attorney that presented our program to the judge that ordered it as rehab for the first time in that scenario I just went over, where the gentleman had his prison sentence cut in half and probation and SO taken away, but in its place rehab. He learned about it from one of the female probation officers. And then there are other men who have charges pending that are in our recovery groups because that was their rock bottom, was getting caught and having charges. And they're already working on their permanent healing in a recovery group. But, we've shared that ruling as precedent with their defense attorney in the hopes that they could advocate for another judge to order it in their case as well. And we don't know if that's going to work.
Is it safe to say that the starting point is to encourage any lawyer, whether it's prosecution or I guess more so on the defense side, to say I want them to get this training specifically?
Yeah.
If you are a lawyer who's maybe listening to this or knows somebody and can start advocating for a better rehabilitation, I believe in defense attorneys by all means. That defense should still lead to restoration, not just you get off, that kind of thing.
It's case by case.
Yeah.
And I've never advocated for sanctions to be removed.
Yeah.
There's consequences to your actions. Even if you have a pot-marked brain like that sex addict brain and you can't make good decisions, they're still your decisions. Mm-hmm. You're responsible for your actions. Mm-hmm. That never goes away. I'm just asking to add rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So that guys don't stay stuck. 10 years ago, I was buying 100 times a year. I don't do that anymore. And I really think that the world should be very curious how I was able to do that. People should be super interested on how was that possible. And it's not just me. I could get half a dozen guys into this room who would be willing to tell you that it's true for them too, and dozens others that are still too scared.
What was the ultimate difference that made a difference between? Because you said you've been to John School.
Yeah, that John School didn't help me. You know what's so funny is I walked out of that John School in St. Paul, Minnesota in May of 2018, and I said to myself, that was so stupid. Somebody should make a John School that actually deals with the root cause of what I'm dealing with. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it looks like that person is turning out to be me. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
What was the true, and just so our audience understands, who hasn't listened to your story and stuff like that, help us understand the difference between being educated, John School, or being rehabilitated, which is the John University you're talking about. What is the true difference in that?
Well, rehabilitated means to me that somebody was dealing with an addiction, or at the minimum, like a sex dependency, and just, stepped into sex buying before a full-blown addiction took root. But, did the work and got the individual therapy to find out what in their life was really driving that behavior. Typically, there have been decades before a guy gets into actual sex buying, where he was self-medicating his unresolved trauma with pornography-assisted masturbation. That's typically what's been going on. And in those 20 years or so, his brain has changed to look like the one, that scan we looked at, and he's just very compromised. So when I hear the word rehabilitation, I hear about a guy who went into a recovery group, got the support of other men, started learning all about the brain, all about addiction, went through a multitude of recovery workbooks, did a ton of homework, found sobriety, allowed his brain the time it needed to heal. That same neuroplasticity that diminished his brain when he was consuming porn, it works in reverse. It can be fully restored. The example Dave gave about a pristine field that's walked over the same way every day, the path forms, that was the first brain scan we looked at, the one on the right. But if you can find sobriety and stop for a meaningful period of time, we're talking about many, many months for it to heal, but your brain can look like the healthy brain on the left again. And, that's just a miracle that can happen, but it can happen. So these are the things, the ingredients that are swimming in my head when I hear the word rehabilitated. Educated just means, you listen to the presentation and, you learn some facts about human trafficking that you didn't know when you walked in. One is very much on the surface, and the other goes quite a bit deeper. And it's that second one where we go deeper that's really needed.
Thanks for listening to our episode. If you have not subscribed to our podcast, please do so. And if you want to look into further educational resources to prevent human trafficking in your area and learn how to better assist direct service providers of commercial sex victims, please visit usiaht.org/abolitionist to become an abolitionist. Our abolitionist subscribers receive access to all of our resources, emails, and action plans to make America a trafficking-free zone. That's usiaht.org/abolitionist.